Dear Father in heaven, Lord, nothing goes on that you don't know about. And you know, Father, all the turmoil that many people are in across many states, Lord, and even around the world in various parts of the world with different circumstances. But Lord, there people, I pray, are being drawn to you through this great time, Lord, that your mercy would be seen in this great time of judgment. We have faith, Father, and trust in you and protecting your people and the work that you're doing, Father, that only you can do to prepare the hearts of people to come to you. So though, Father, this is all very difficult to see and brings some challenging things, it brings to mind when the Israelites had to experience the first of the plagues along with the Egyptians, and that's what we're witnessing. We just pray, Father, to have the trust in you and belief in you necessary to continue, Father, to press forward and to show and demonstrate our faith in you, that your name would be glorified in all that is happening, Father, that we would still shine like the lights that you are raising us to be. We just ask you, Father, to put a special blessing of protection around those that are in harm's way. There are many of your people. Our sister Jackie she's got members of her family. Father, we have Brother Fel and Logina with us tonight, but we know that where their home is, that's a terrible fire that is still 0% contained and has enormously grown. We know, Father, where Brother Victor and his family is, that there are, that one hasn't grown as significantly at all. And thus far, he is still in his home. And we also have some other members that used to be among us, and perhaps, Father, they would be members that would come back and join this movement. Our brother Kenny and his family, and our sister Becky and her family that live in the area where Brother Fell does. And we just lift them up to you, Father, and ask you to put a hedge of protection around them and around their families, Father. We just pray, Father, to be able to be a witness for you in whatever circumstances that come. We thank you, Father, for the blessing, the privilege of being able to still come together, Father, and fellowship together and study together and be prepared for this great work that is to come. Father, many events are taking place. Every day the news gets more and more shocking and even disturbing to people. But I'm in awe to watch, Father, having some of us, maybe others also, but I know myself, I have family members that I pray that would be drawn out of drawn into you, but to see how far things have gone and the deceptions that are taking place, to have people that go along with those, Lord. We just pray that your blessing and your mercy and your grace would pour upon hearts all around and draw them, Father, unto yourself. Prepare their hearts to be drawn unto yourself. And may your mercy just abound, Lord, in this time. We ask you for your Holy Spirit to be with us, Father, tonight. We're just going to do some review, and we just ask you, Father, to help us that we might sharpen our minds and sharpen our understanding of World War III and the various lines that bring us there. We thank you, Lord, and we praise you, and we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I wanted to read something first, if everybody's okay. Just a real quick thing in Desire of Ages that I read yesterday that I thought was pretty, I don't know, just timely. This is the chapter, Desire of Ages, Peace Be Still. And actually, it's really, really good reading through the whole thing, but I don't want to take up the study with it, but it's a good chapter to maybe go back and fall on. But we know that they go out onto the sea and there's a storm, and Jesus is down in the ship sleeping peacefully. So the disciples are crying out, and Jesus says, "Peace be still." The storm ceases, the pillows sink to rest, the clouds roll away, and the stars shine forth. The boat rests upon a quiet sea. Then turning to his disciples, Jesus asked sorrowfully, "Why are ye fearful? Have ye not yet faith?" A hush fell upon the disciples. Even Peter did not attempt to express the awe that filled his heart. The boats that had set out to accompany Jesus had been in the same peril with that of the disciples. Terror and despair had seized their occupants, but the command of Jesus brought quiet to the scene of tumult. The fury of the storm had driven the boats into close proximity, and all on board beheld the miracle. In the calm that followed, fear was forgotten. The people whispered among themselves, "What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" Thought it was interesting to see that the fury of the storm drove those boats, brought everybody into close proximity. So you've got the winds and the sea. When Jesus was awakened to meet the storm, he was in perfect peace. There was no trace of fear in word or look, for no fear was in his heart. But he rested not in the possession of almighty power. It was not as the master of earth and sea and sky that he reposed in quiet. That power he had laid down, and he says, "I can of mine own self do nothing." He trusted in the Father's might. It was in faith in God's love and care, that Jesus rested, and the power of that word which stilled the storm was the power of God. As Jesus rested by faith in the Father's care, so we are to rest in the care of our Savior. If the disciples had trusted him, they would have been kept in peace. Their fear in the time of danger revealed their unbelief. In their efforts to save themselves, they forgot Jesus, and it was only when in despair of self-dependence they turned to him that he could give them help. How often the disciples' experience is ours. When the tempest of temptation gathered, and the fierce lightnings flash, and the waves sweep over us, we battle with the storm alone, forgetting that there is one who can help us. We trust to our own strength till our hope is lost, and we are ready to perish. Then we remember Jesus, and if we call upon him to save us, we shall not cry in vain. Though he sorrowfully reproves our unbelief and self-confidence, he never fails to give us the help we need, whether on the land or on the sea. If we have the Savior in our hearts, there is no need of fear. Living faith in the Redeemer will smooth the sea of life and will deliver us from danger in the way that he knows to do best. There is another spiritual lesson in this miracle of the stilling of the tempest. Every man's experience testifies to the truth of the words of Scripture. The wicked are like the troubled sea, when it cannot rest. There's no peace, saith my God, to the wicked. Sin has destroyed our peace, while self is unsubdued. We can find no rest. The masterful passions of the heart no human power can control. We are as helpless here as were the disciples to quiet the raging storm. But he who spoke peace to the billows of Galilee has spoken the word of peace for every soul. However fierce the tempest, those who turn to Jesus with the cry, "Lord, save us," will find deliverance. His grace that reconciles the soul to God quiets the strife of human passion, and in his love the heart is at rest. He maketh the storm a calm, so that the waves thereof are still. Then are they glad because they be quiet. So he bringeth them unto their desired haven. Being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. The work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness, quietness, and assurance forever. It really touched my heart with all that we're seeing now, and this is only the beginning. And knowing that if we are faithful, if we are faithful and go through this period of time, this dispensation, and and our hearts are right with all the light that has been shining on us, and all is accepted, we go through faithful and pass this test. Because we know that Gethsemane and the wilderness are two back-to-back tests, and we're coming up on Panium, and we know that, you know, those that fall, you know, all along the way. But when we get to Panium, if we are faithful and get to Panium, things are going to escalate even more so then, because right now we've been in hiding, you know, in this time during COVID-19, and not out there and exposed, but we're going to be coming up on the scene of being exposed, and the attacks upon us are going to be great. And I know myself that I've had experiences where I realize I'm not fully ready for, I'm not sure how to say, not fully ready to you know, I've still witnessed weaknesses in me, and that's the work that, among many other things, the work that he's begun in us, that he says he will complete, that we're ready to withstand the attacks and love our enemies and bless those that curse us. And that's what I've been praying for through these past this past time during this dispensation, that we would love our enemies and bless those that curse us. And I had a little exchange going on with a church member, not somebody in the movement, but a church member that kind of went off on a tangent on my son's Facebook page about not, you know, how socialism is evil and helping people is evil because homeless people get themselves homeless. And my son wound up deleting the comments, but it was a nice exchange with my son. But it's just, some of the things that we're seeing are almost unbelievable if we were not privileged to know as much as we do. So it's my prayer for all of us that we are fully understanding the message and fully prepared for to what is to come and go forward. And we're not going to go through it without that perfect trust and that perfect faith and that perfect belief that Jesus had in the Father, and to rest in that peace. So thank you for bearing with me on that. Okay, so this will be, you know, pretty much review, and maybe we can, anybody else that has mics that are doing okay can help us read. Sister Susan, are you able to participate? Anybody that wants to, I know that you're not get to very often, so I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, I can.
That would be awesome.
You want me to start reading here?
Yeah, if you would.
Okay. We'll start with a quick review of what we understood in World War II and the Fourth Diadochi War. We marked 1979 to 1989 as a 10-year history. It's the Third Diadochi War that gives us another witness for a 10-year history that leads us to 1989. Then we have 2014, and what do we mark at 2014? If we're talking about the Third Diadochi War, we can mark Ukraine. So the Fourth Diadochi War, it's the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. World War II gives us a pact between the King of the North and the King of the South, an alliance. In World War II, that was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. We marked that in 2014. Then in 2016, from the Fourth Diadochi War, we have Ipsus, and it's a battle between the King of the North and a threefold enemy. So she's combining the wars on this one here.
Yeah. The line of Pyrrhus, and then World War II, and she's kind of bringing in the Third and Fourth Diadochi War there.
Eminent, what is it? How's his name go? Eumenes. Antigonus and the four generals.
Yeah, Eumenes comes in from World War I. Yeah, did I say that right?
I was reviewing that today. So she was combining Pyrrhus and World War II with World War I today, so I was trying to, in my mind, you know,
I misspoke.
capture it.
Yeah, I misspoke. It was Third Diadochi War. So yeah, it's hard to keep it all straight.
Boy, that's for sure.
So
We bring that to World War II, and we have the King of the North, Hitler, also take on the threefold enemy, and that was Britain, France, and Poland, and he invades Poland. So you have a group of three versus the King of the North, and the King of the North and the King of the South for that battle are working together in alliance, and this is the beginning on the Western Front.
so you have the beginning here for World War II, the Western Front, and then World War III lines up with the Third Diadochi War. Then we'll get to that if we get that far.
One of my bosses, when I was in training to become a Montessori preschool and kindergarten teacher, she was a German lady, and she had married an African-American military man over in Germany, which was ahead of its time. And her family sort of disowned her, but they came out here and had children. But when she was a young girl, she lived in Poland, and she was there when Hitler invaded. They took her family and put them in concentration camp. And there was another teacher I worked with at the time, and she'd always burn toast in the morning. And Sybil was the lady's name that had been a prisoner of war, but they did escape. But Sybil would come in when that toast was burning, and she would get very angry. And we never saw her get so angry ever. But we came to realize that the smell of the toast reminded her of the smell from when they were burning
Yeah.
people. Yeah. But so I
Wow.
kind of learned some of that history before, you know, just, it's funny how God places people in your life
Yeah.
years before that give you little snippets and backgrounds that when he brings us to this place to study these things, you've got those little pieces in your mind already there, you know?
Amen. We can truly, we all have a line. Is that what everybody's saying? I think Parminder has said that we all have a line.
Yes, I haven't seen the video where he says that, but Sister Adriana is the one who said she heard him say that.
Mm.
So let's see, we'll discuss that later, how that has progressed for him. That is what we understand from Pyrrhus in the history of World War II.
This
Or
is the next slide, so you can
something.
begin.
Oh, okay. After 2016, we marked 2018, and Pyrrhus gives us the Battle of Heraclea. So we have Ipsus, 2016, and Heraclea in 2018. Heraclea is marked in October, November, and December of 2018. The Battle of Heraclea in the history of World War II, we have a fracturing of the alliance between the between the King of the North and King of the South. They're able to put that back together, and it lasts another year, a little bit longer. Then we mark 2019, the breaking of this pact, entirely at the beginning of the war on the Eastern Front. This is when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. So we have Western Front and Eastern Front. The Western Front takes us from 2016 to Panium, and the Eastern Front takes us from 2019 at Raphia through to Panium. So particularly from 2016, we've been seeing between Trump and the West this war going on as he fights to control the three branches of government. He already has the executive as Hitler took Poland. Then he has a drawn out war for the legislative and the judicial branches. We'll discuss that later, how that has progressed for him. That is what we understand from Pyrrhus in the history of World War II. So he's got the judicial branches already, wouldn't you say? Even though they're waiting for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they still have the majority of the judges now are conservative, and they've been filling the lower courts with judges. So
I was gonna say, how does that fit in with what he's attempting to do now with that lawsuit? Is it a lawsuit?
which lawsuit?
The one with the woman that you shared last.
Oh, yeah, okay. There's so much to keep a track of. I can't even think of what her name is. Yeah, he supposedly, that was a sexual case.
Yeah,
Yes, and I guess she has the dress with the semen on the dress, but he has refused to do a DNA test, and now Attorney General Barr wants to be Trump's defender or whatever you want to call it. It's a mess.
yeah.
So,
That, I mean, is that, I don't know enough about that. I don't know if anybody understands or watched that or knows. Does anybody have understanding on it that the judicial branch, if I understood it correctly, is going to be the defender of the United States instead of attorneys being the defender of Donald Trump? Is that something that gets done?
I'm not sure I understand what I'm not really sure I get what you're saying.
Well, that's what I remember reading. Did anybody else watch that to have understanding of it? Is it something that can happen that isn't it Barr and the Department of Justice is going to defend the United States based on the statements that he made as a president. Therefore, they're defending the United States instead of Trump having lawyers defend him.
I haven't read that much detail, so you've got a piece there you're adding that I hadn't even considered.
Oh, okay, okay.
I thought he was defending Trump because it's the president, the executive office, so therefore,
yeah, they're actually saying based on the fact that he made the statement while he was president of the United States, that therefore the DOJ will be defending him, and they submitted to have this done, but it's not what do you call it, approved or what have you, but they went before. I don't know what they did. Maybe somebody else watched it all, but that's what they're trying to do, is have the United States own Department of Justice defend the United States because the president made the statements of, because I think it has to do with not, I don't think she used the word slander, but I'm trying to think of the word. But he made a statement that he wasn't even attracted to that type of woman. And so they're saying that he made that statement as the president of the United States. Therefore, it's the president of the United States that the Department of Justice is going to defend instead of his lawyers defending him. And I just wondered if anybody knew anything about that. And is that something that, I mean, it sounded absurd to me, but I mean, is that what happened? Does anybody have any idea about that?
if it is what's happening, it's unprecedented too. I don't think that's ever happened.
I mean, if that, because it kind of sounds to me like part of the having more control over the judicial branch.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So all that would be left would be the legislative, right? And they pretty much don't have any power because the Senate is majority Republican. So just like in the impeachment, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't move it.
Yeah.
What Congress had decided couldn't be moved. So
Yeah, no legislation. Absolutely no legislation at all. There's no working.
yeah, their hands are tied.
Does anybody else want to read?
I'll go ahead and read.
Okay.
Let's see, we're on page 4. After the Battle of how do you say that, Beneventum?
Yeah, Beneventum.
Yeah, okay. Another lesson that we have from Pyrrhus is a repeat of the following structure. We actually came to this study by going to Daniel 11:40. Daniel 11:40, Part A, takes us to the history of 1798. Prior to 1798, what do we have between the king of the north and the king of the south? There's an ongoing war between the king of the north and the king of the south. And then 1798, we mark the deadly wound. After the deadly wound, there's a death in 1799. Then in the future, we mark a resurrection.
So we see an ongoing war, then we see the king of the south receives a deadly wound, then we see a death, and then there's a resurrection. So we went through those studies pretty well. Okay.
We take that to Daniel 11:40 Part B, and we found the exact same structure. We saw that we have 1989 as being the end point in an ongoing war between the king of the north and the king of the south. So we mark war, deadly wound, a progressive fall, and 1991 death. Then we understood that the king of the south would again resurrect and come back into the Bible story. Because of Sunday law is Daniel 11, verse 41. We're still living in Daniel 11:40. This is the model of Part B of Daniel 11, 1989, marking the defeat of the king of the south.
So you have the king of the north up here, comparing, contrasting the two verses, or the verse, but two parts of the verses, compare and contrast. If there was a deadly wound and a death here, this ongoing war, deadly wound and a death here, and a resurrection for the king of the north, then we found that the king of the south would have an ongoing war between the king of the north and the king of the south, and there would be a deadly wound, a progressive death, and then there would later be a resurrection.
Right. What we have marked again in this history is since 2016, recognizing that the Battle of Panium, marked at 2021, is also a defeat for the king of the south. So we can place it on the same structure. Prior to the defeat of the king of the south at Panium, there must have been an ongoing war between the king of the north and the king of the south that leads us up to Panium. Panium then is what? What does prophecy choose to mark as significant? The deadly wound. What do we know of the king of the south at Panium? Is it gone? It's going to start to fall, and then it will die at the Sunday law, is the death. We know that this completes the history. Let's see, I lost my place. At Sunday law is the death. We know that this completes the story of the resurrection. So this death will be final.
So this is our history here, and talking about from 1989. I don't know if it's talking about 1989 ongoing, but for sure the 10-year proxy war that's going on that's going to end at 2021. That will be the death or the deadly wound of the king of the south. And this is coming down from this resurrection here to come to this ongoing war to this deadly wound again.
Okay. When we take the history of Pyrrhus, we want to remember it takes us through Ephesus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. At Beneventum, Pyrrhus is defeated, but the south of Italy is not entirely conquered, and Pyrrhus is not killed. If we could remember this is progressive and take our minds back to those studies. Beneventum was what date? It's 275 BC, and then you have 272 BC at Sunday law. Between the two, you have 273 BC. So the Battle of Beneventum was 275 BC. Pyrrhus is defeated. The king of the south is defeated. The southern portion of Italy that Rome had been fighting for was inevitably lost to Rome, but hadn't yet fully been taken, and Pyrrhus hadn't been killed. It's fully taken at 272 with the fall of Tarentum, and it's also in 272 that we know Pyrrhus died in the streets of Argos. So we just wanted to remember this history and that it fits into the same structure that we have observed as in 1798 and 1989.
Pyrrhus loses his spheres of influence. And we know at 2021, Putin loses his spheres of influence. And this is, I know there are others, but it's a battle over Syria and battle over the Middle East, but there are other areas involved too. But then when Tarentum falls, you have Pyrrhus dies, and then this signifies the death of the king of the south.
So I'll read this last paragraph and then someone else can take it up.
Okay.
This can teach us quite a few things. It gives us license to overlay 1989 with the Battle of Panium, and that can teach us a number of things. Because we have the United States rising up as a unilateral world superpower. So at Panium, you have the rise of the United States as a unilateral world superpower. So at Panium, we have the rise of the United States as a unilateral superpower. As the King of the South falls from Panium to Sunday Law, this is telling us also the story of the rise of the King of the North as a world dictatorship. He's no longer restrained by the King of the South. If we were to think about the Cold War, the United States was restrained through that history by another superpower that had nuclear weapons. It could serve as some type of bulwark against the power of the United States, as Russia is today. As Russia falls in the history of Panium, that restraint is removed. And this is one of the main reasons that the United States is able to rise as this world superpower. So this is a review of Pyrrhus and the history of World War II.
Okay. Somebody like to read?
Sure. We identify the Eastern Front from 2019, and we call this an information war because we are in the information age. What are they fighting for? What made the Soviet Union a superpower? It's a superpower and it's alive in 1989 and it's dead in 1991. When then is the life that it has? It has something in 1989 that it loses in 1991. That marks the death. What was the only thing that it had that it lost in this history? Spheres of influence. So in the history from World War II through 1989, it had all of this territory of Eastern Europe. It had Eastern Europe, all of these sub-states, these spheres of influence that we most often refer to it as. From 1945 to 1989, it has these spheres of influence. In 1989, that crack in the Berlin Wall, what does it start to lose? It's losing its grip on those countries, and it loses its grip on those countries. Prophecy symbolizes that as dying. So in 1989, Eastern satellite states start to slip out of the hand of the Soviet Union. As they slip out, the King of the South, as the King of the South, as this restraint to the King of the North starts to die, and then in December 1991, the Soviet Union is dissolved, and all that is left is a weak, helpless Russia. That is symbolized as death. It's lost its spheres of influence. It's lost Eastern Europe. What do we expect the king of the north and the king of the south to be fighting over today? Spheres of influence. This is what makes the king of the south powerful. Once we've gone through World War I and World War II and go into application, we'll discuss that in more detail, but it must be spheres of influence that the king of the north and the king of the south were fighting over. You may have heard of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We see America so upset about immigration, particularly immigration from South America. The United States, particularly Trump's base, is really fighting against this influx of immigrants from the South America. Particularly one of the countries that they do not like to see immigrants from is Guatemala. So in the history of the Cold War, you have all these other little countries. It's not just Eastern Europe. There's other countries, and you probably all know the history of Cuba. But there's other countries across the world that are turning socialist, that are either allying with the United States or the Soviet Union, whether it's in the Middle East or in South America, or it's not all just Eastern Europe, it's worldwide.
So they took to try to spread their way of life, their ideology to different parts of the world, where the United States wants to take their ideology and spread it in different parts of the world to see who can have the control over the whole world.
So in the history of the Cold War, what began in 1953? Guatemala had a president who was elected by the people. We'll give a brief history. In Guatemala, the people elected a president. He's a pretty good guy, and they had this issue in Guatemala. Guatemala, it has all of this land, and the United States sent companies in, and they had banana plantations. So the United States corporations control or own a lot of the land of Guatemala. This president is elected, and he's socialistic, which scares the United States. They're in the history of the Red Scares. Is that right?
I think it's supposed to say Red Scare, not plural, but yeah, Red Scare
Yeah.
of
Red
communism spreading.
Right.
This is during the Cold War.
Yeah. Once this socialistic government takes hold of Guatemala, the United States begins to fear that the Soviet Union is going to have influence here, and socialism will spread in South America. So the CIA orchestrates a plot or a coup to wipe out the government and elect someone who is not socialistic. When they do that, they take down the government. The coup is successful, and they see elected a dictatorship over Guatemala. If you want to know why Guatemala, one of the main reasons is so messed up today and why it has so many problems, is because the United States sent in the CIA and overthrow their elected government. When we see Donald Trump's arguments about immigrants, this is why there's immigrants. Much of this unrest has come out of this conflict between the king of the north and the king of the south. We discussed all that. We discussed that all through this year, how these two global superpowers have influenced these wars, whether it's Yemen or Syria or Venezuela, to the deterrent of the people. This was the history in the Cold War, where not just Eastern Europe, but all of these other countries, the United States and the Soviet Union, are fighting to turn the government either socialistic in favor of the Soviet Union or capitalist in favor of the United States. They did so much damage in that history. Amen.
So the U.S. in the fear of socialism being spread and the Red Scare being spread and Russia getting spheres of influence, or at this time it was the Soviet Union, that in this fear of socialism and communism being spread, they go in, and the U.S. goes in. They wind up in war, which causes the people to have to leave, which is in the long run, what, if I understood correctly, what she's saying here is the cause of all this immigration of people wanting to flee where they're at. And that we're a big part of the cause of that. And now Donald Trump wants to shut the border and not let people in when they're trying to escape war in their country.
Yeah. They're fighting all through this war, 1945 to 1989, over spheres of influence. So we know that in this war, what leads up to Panium, what they're fighting for is over spheres of influence. At the waymark of Panium, what begins to come out of the grip of Russia? Vladimir Putin. Is his global power, his influence over the other countries that are relying on him for support on the world stage. Somebody else can read. They're starting to run together on me.
Somebody want to read? I'll read a little bit. And
We want to,
somebody want to read?
yeah, I'm reading.
Okay.
We want to fill in the gaps in this history because if what we're saying is that this war is about spheres of influence, and where the king of the north and the king of the south control a country like Guatemala, the problem that we've identified with this story since very early on from the first time it was presented is that 2019 marks the beginning of the war between the king of the north and the king of the south. If what they are fighting for is spheres of influence, why do we not have that marked all the way through this history with Iraq, with Syria, Venezuela, and with Ukraine? They've been fighting over spheres of influence for a long time. It didn't begin this year. If they've been fighting over for a long time, that's already a description of what this war looks like. This comes back to what we discussed previously. We need the first woe and the second woe to explain the third woe. We need the first and the second world wars to come together to explain the third. This narrative only gives us the Second World War. It doesn't give us the history of the first. So we need to take the first and combine it with the second to have a complete picture. Now we'll go back through the history of the Diadochi Wars. We understood that the Fourth Diadochi War and the story of Pyrrhus, combined with the World War II, gave us this first line. And when we talked about the Fourth Diadochi War, it lines up with World War II. But what we identified was that this Fourth Diadochi War is a war between some major players named Antigonus and his son Demetrius, fighting against Seleucus, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander. This is the story of the breakdown of Alexander's great empire. So Alexander the Great dies in 323 BC, and in Daniel 11:4, it just tells us Alexander dies and his kingdom is divided into four. These four, Seleucus, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander. All the Bible narrative does is say Alexander dies and up comes four. But these four Diadochi Wars that we speak about, they are the history between the death of Alexander and the rising up of these four generals. That process to go from 1 to 4 took 22 years. So Alexander died in 323 BC, and we have these four generals divide up his empire and the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. Just so we know where we are historically, we're in the midst of Daniel 11:4 and the breakdown of Alexander's empire. We recognize that 22 years going from one horn to four horns is these four wars, and the Fourth Diadochi War is what lines up with World War II. We also recognize was that this Fourth Diadochi War is a war between Antigonus and his son and our four famous generals. The Third Diadochi War is between the exact same players. So the third was between Antigonus and his son and our four generals. The fourth was between Antigonus and his son and our four generals. And all that happened is there's an armistice in the middle and a break from fighting. The temporary peace between the same issues arose again, and Antigonus restarted that war. We know that World War II is just a continuation of World War I.
Could I make a comment?
Yeah.
There is a really good, I don't know if any of you have Prime, but we, through Amazon, we had to order it because of coronavirus and my mom needed a lot of supplies. So anyway, they have really good documentaries on there. And there's one that I was watching all about World War I because I've read about it, but sometimes it's also helpful to see it in the way they do in a documentary, and they've got the real footage and everything. And it's really interesting that those two wars do blend. And I haven't started the other documentary, but there's one about this peace that we're talking about right here in this paragraph, the peace in between and all the things that happen in between the wars. But they're virtually almost the same war. That's what makes it so difficult to get these details cemented in the brain, because they have the war on the Eastern and Western front in both the wars. And there's just so many similarities. It's packed with details.
Yeah. One war with just a break in the middle.
Yeah, but if you
Back
get
up to-
a chance to watch that, it's really excellent. The documentary on Prime.
On which one?
Prime through Amazon. If you order Prime, you don't have
What's the name of it again?
I'll look it up while I go on mute. I'll look it up and put it in the chat.
I put my phone on so I can watch the chat. You can't watch it on this when I have the slideshow on. So I'll catch it in the chat this time.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Yeah, this one, I backed up one. This one showed it, that it's the same players both times here. And so it shows that it's the same war, one long war, with just the armistice in the middle. So it shows the same players here, with just an armistice in the middle. It wasn't gonna let me go backwards, but it did, so.
Here's a quote from heritagehistory.com. The Fourth War of the Diadochi War was just a continuation of the third. Antigonus and his son Demetrius were at war simultaneously with Ptolemy in the south, Seleucus in the east, Lysimachus in the north. The third and fourth war was one war with an armistice in the middle. World War I and World War II was one war with an armistice in the middle. Germany against the Allied forces. Germany against the Allied forces. Antigonus against who were known as the Allies. So not only does World War II come with a war behind it that just begins that process, so does the Fourth Diadochi War. So we go back into the history of the third to understand what happened and also combined it with World War I.
You're kind of fading out. So everybody can follow along on the screen, but you were kind of fading out. But just showing again the same thing, that it's one war. It's the Antigonus against the Allies, Antigonus against the Allies, Germany against the Allied forces, Germany against the Allied forces. One war with just an armistice in the middle. And that's Third and Fourth Diadochi War in World War I and World War II.
We could take much longer on this study, But it would
We could take much longer on this study, but it would take too long. So we're going to skip through this, and it has been presented before. Many of us are familiar with it, but we want to pick up some points. Some context will be necessary for those who are new. If we go back into the history of the Third Diadochi War, we see Antigonus has had a long drawn-out war with its arch nemesis. This is the history of a war between Antigonus, who represents the king of the north, and Eumenes, who represents the king of the south in this history. Antigonus has had this long drawn-out war with Eumenes, who is in the east. At the Battle of Gabin, is that how you say that one word? Gabin? Antigonus defeats Eumenes. Antigonus finally defeats him with an interesting strategy. First of all, Antigonus has two major allies through this war. In the First and Second Diadochi Wars, there's dozens of generals. By the end of the second, most of those generals have died, been killed in battle, or just subjected. So now there's just these five, Antigonus and these allies. Demetrius is a son just working for his father at this stage. There's these five left prior to this, and there's also Eumenes, and he is extremely powerful. He has what is known as the Silver Shield. These were the most highly trained forces, the equivalent of the Navy SEALs in the United States. They were like Alexander's Marines were Navy SEALs. They were men who were in their 60s and 70s who had fought for Alexander the Great through all of his campaigns. They were just machines of war. They were so strong and so powerful, and they were known as the Silver Shield. They fought for Eumenes. So Eumenes had control of all of the East. He has control of the elite forces of Alexander the Great's remnants of his army. And in the time previously, he's come on the wrong side of all these generals. So Antigonus is tasked with wiping him out, with destroying him, and he's too powerful. So I was trying to see what Sister Susan put in here. So it's called the First World War I. And it's a series then, okay. And on Amazon Prime. I'll check it out. I might have watched some of that, but I'm not sure. But I'll check it out. And she got it in the chat, so anybody that has the Amazon Prime can go in there. As Antigonus attempts to wipe out Eumenes, he creates two important allies. One of them is Python, and the second is Seleucus. So there's another general, a more insignificant general in that history, and that's Python. He has some territory, and he's fighting on behalf of Antigonus, literally alongside of him in some of those battles. Seleucus is also giving moral support. He's harassing Eumenes whenever he can and supporting Antigonus, feeding his army, etc. So these important allies, Python and Seleucus, are aiding Antigonus as he tries to wipe out Eumenes. Battle of Gabin, if that's how you say it. The second great battle, the third battle in total. Let's see. Between Antigonus, and I think that's his one-eye name. I don't know that I can say that. And Eumenes, two of Alexander the Great's successors, the so-called Diadochi. The battle was fought near Gabin in Persia in 315 BC and ended the second war of the Diadochi. It established Antigonus as the most powerful of the successors. Impossible Peace. That's a whole different one, right?
Yeah, that's the time lapse in between the wars. I haven't looked at this one yet, but that's what I was trying to say is they have this documentary that tells some of the history in between those wars
Okay.
and what happens in between those wars. But the other one, that's all, I couldn't give you a link. That's the only way I could get it.
Yeah, it's probably because it's on Amazon Prime, you gotta have it.
Yeah.
Probably.
But it's really excellent if you want more detailed understanding.
It would be helpful. I know I would like it. I'll check it out. Does somebody else want to read? I don't know who we have here.
Oh, I want to read.
Okay, that would be great.
But I think I lost where we were. Did I? Or is it right on here? I can't.
You lost what? We're on the screen that we're at.
Okay. At the Battle of Gabin, they finally come head to head, and you have Antigonus and Python attack the forces against Eumenes. So these two sides charge each other, and what they send in first is the elephants. For those of you that are familiar with the history of Pyrrhus, you'll know why that's significant and what they symbolize. They charge the elephants, and this is on a vast salt plain. So they're meeting at opposite sides of this vast salt plain, and the first front sent in the charges is all of their elephants. As these elephants charge, the dust arises. It swells up on the salt plain and hides each other from their view. This creates chaos. In the midst of this chaos, Antigonus comes up with a clever plan. Eumenes has the silver shields. These men are what we would consider elderly, but in those days still in great fighting shape. And very close to them and not well protected is all their baggage. Everything that they've ever won fighting for Alexander through all of his campaigns, all of their 60 and 70 years of life, all of their wealth, everything is in that baggage train, along with their families, their wives, and children. It's left behind them, and it's not well protected. So as this salt plain erupts and this dust cloud arises, Antigonus sends men behind unseen, and they take this baggage train. This battle between Antigonus and Eumenes, neither side wins. It's kind of a stalemate. There's no clear winner announced. What Antigonus has done is, through the charging of the elephants and the confusion, he has taken the families and the wealth of the silver shields. The silver shields, they want back all that they've ever campaigned for. So they go to Antigonus and they say, and they make a deal. They say, they will surrender Eumenes if you give back our families and our baggage. Antigonus agrees. Eumenes is defeated. He's handed over to Antigonus and killed.
So you've got this salt plain in this battle. The elephants charge, stir up the dust. Antigonus comes around and sends people around and steals all of the silver shields baggage, all their money, everything. And to get it back, they go ahead and, if I understood that correctly, to get it back, they go against then Eumenes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Eumenes is defeated. So you've got this war of Antigonus, the king of the north, Eumenes, the king of the south. And you come to the Battle of Gabin, and then Eumenes is defeated. And I think that's the spelling. That's the spelling I found on a couple of websites, Python and Seleucus. It's spelled different in different places, so I had a hard time with it. But Python and Seleucus are allied with Antigonus at this point. We know that Seleucus is one of the four that Antigonus fights later.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, so we'll make this application directly because otherwise we'll lose the information as we go along. We talk about the history of 1989. It's marked in inspiration as a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south. There has been this long ongoing war between the United States and the Soviet Union. In 1989, we marked the defeat of the Soviet Union. defeated in battle. One of the main reasons the Soviet Union lost all of its strength in its history, it went into an ill-timed, ill-thought-out war in Afghanistan. This is known as the 10-year Afghanistan War from 1979 to 1989. This 10-year war, it drained not just all of the resources of the Soviet Union, it destroyed their economy. It also started tiring the people, and it destroyed their confidence in their own government. In this war, the United States has two allies. The first one was fighting with it directly, as Python fought with Antigonus directly, and that was the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen were the rebel forces inside Afghanistan that were supported and fought on behalf of the United States. So they have one ally fighting directly for them with the Mujahideen, as Antigonus had one ally, Python. But then he also had another, Seleucus. Seleucus is marked in prophecy as carrying the symbology of the king of the north, king of Babylon. Also in this history, the United States went into another alliance with John Paul II and the papacy. We all know that the Time magazine cover of 1989, the Holy Alliance, that brought down the Soviet Union, John Paul II and Ronald Reagan. So the United States has two important allies, the Mujahideen and the papacy. Antigonus has two important allies, Python and Seleucus.
You can continue if you want, unless somebody else wants to now read.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it change. Well, Jim wants to read.
I'm enjoying you reading. I'm enjoying all you guys reading.
Start right here.
Yeah.
But what did this defeat look like in 1989? First of all, what are they losing? Spheres of influence. In 1989, what did that look like? We have the fall of the Berlin Wall, and who attacked the Berlin Wall? Who started to take it down? What we need to see is that the Soviet Union was dismantled, ultimately destroyed from the inside. So at the fall of the Berlin Wall, it's not the United States or the West that comes to that wall and starts chipping away at it. It is actually the East. It's actually the people of the Soviet Union that start to dismantle their own infrastructure, their own government. So through these years of revolution, 89, 90, 91, the Soviet Union fell from the inside. The main reason they fell from the inside is because of this covert war where the United States sent propaganda through Voice of America radio, through their information channels to the Soviet Union, dropping pamphlets, feeding this information, even things like Western food, Western television, sending all this into the Soviet Union, creating a discontent with the government. And at the same time, you have John Paul II doing the same, visiting Poland, starting to go into Eastern Europe and criticize the governments. So it was not a well-kept secret, this subtle subterfuge that ultimately brought down the Soviet Union from 1989 to 1991 from the inside. You don't see the United States in 1989 tearing down that wall. The people of the Soviet Union did that work themselves. The people of Eumenes, they betrayed him. This side betrayed their own government. They took down that empire themselves. So you have Antigonus defeats Eumenes, and he takes on the title of Master of Asia. Antigonus titles himself Master of Asia, and he is now a superpower. He has a massive empire that stretches all through the east, all the way into the west. These four generals, they start to become uncomfortable. He takes this title, Master of Asia, and he has this plan that he's going to rebuild Alexander the Great's empire with himself at the head, continuing on that same empire. He wants to see it all united under one government and not split out and divided up north, south, east, and west.
He starts to act like a dictator. I've said this before in other studies for different things, but I remember a long time ago, and I could not remember who at first, someone telling me that the United States was a bully. And I was completely ignorant of anything. I wasn't a Christian. I had no idea about politics. It's like all I saw the USA as was, the one that goes out and helps everybody. Totally didn't know anything. And I just remembered somebody saying that the United States was a bully. And I was like, what do you mean a bully? And I was having a conversation, it's been a little while back, not too far back, with my ex-husband one day. And as I was talking about some of this stuff, I asked him, I said, was it you that actually said that the United States was a bully? And he said, yeah. And I had no idea. I had no idea what was going on, and that the United States was doing what Antigonus did.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and start reading.
Yeah.
As part of this plan, he starts to take down everyone he sees as a threat. So in this history, he has two allies, Python and Seleucus. He quickly starts disregarding Seleucus, but he sees Python also start to become stronger. Python is a 2-bit general in comparison, but he starts to consolidate his territory, and Antigonus starts killing everyone that he sees as a threat. And that soon became Python himself. So even Python was his ally and fought on his behalf. Antigonus had him killed. He starts to become a dictator.
Even though he helps him, he still kills
Yeah.
him because he sees him as a threat.
Yeah. As he's becoming a dictator, he is visiting these different smaller territories like Python's, and he's coming as a friend, and then he's just killing them off. Then he comes to Babylon, and what do you think Seleucus thinks? He thinks, I'm next. So he gets a horse and just flees Babylon. He knows that his ally is really there to kill him. So Seleucus flees, and he comes to Ptolemy down into Egypt, and he's given up Babylon. He starts to work for Ptolemy, and he starts warning these other generals about Antigonus's behavior. They all start to become concerned about his power. So at this point in time, Seleucus no longer has territory, and we're not going to include him as part of these three. Now he's just a general fighting in the army of Ptolemy's. So these three remaining, not yet kings, but they're essentially kings. These three men, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Seleucus, they send an ultimatum to Antigonus that says, stop acting as a dictator. Stop consolidating all this territory. And what they start saying is, we want you to start dividing your wealth and your territory between us. So all the territory that he's gained from defeating Eumenes and the other generals, the others, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassandra, say, we want a part of that. We want you to not act as the dictator, but we want you to act more like a globalist. Everything is going to get shared amongst us. This is an ultimatum from the three allies to Antigonus to stop acting as a dictator and start sharing his power.
Sorry about the typos. I got a few of them around here.
No problem. It'd be worse if I typed it, I'll tell you that. Antigonus rejects his proposal and he decides instead to go to war with them. He goes to war with our three allies and he begins that by attacking the territory of Ptolemy. War begins between Antigonus and our three allies. What they're fighting for is spheres of influence. So he doesn't just attack all of them. First, he attacks his greatest enemy, who has had years of problems with. Who he has finally gone to war with is Ptolemy. So he doesn't attack Egypt itself. He attacks the spheres of influence of Ptolemy.
Now the Ptolemies, they were Greek, right?
Ptolemy's Egypt.
I know, but I
Oh,
feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
I think.
Because Alexander,
Yeah.
I gotta make the connection. I know that,
I thought Egypt a long time ago, but I was reading the other day and it clarified it, and that's why I'm running it by to be sure I'm remembering it right. The Ptolemies were like the Caesars were to Rome, but the Ptolemies were Greek.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, there's so much.
Yeah.
because
You
Alexander,
start to understand it.
It's hard.
and somebody was bringing it up, like, because I think it came up the other night, but Alexandria, because it was named after Alexander.
Yes, I think I said that because in my mind, I thought Alexandria was in Greece. And I
That's
could
right,
not remember Egypt for the life of me. I would always say Greece. And so I looked it up, and it is a Greek city in Egypt. And once I connected that and said in my mind, okay, that's why I keep saying Greece, because it was a Greek city, but it's in Egypt. So yeah, this stuff is hard to order in your mind.
I know. I have I have the added, but maybe I'm not alone in this one, the added bits and pieces of Hollywood that have to be straightened out sometimes too, because I do always remember in the movie Cleopatra that they had the tomb of, I think it was the tomb of Alexander in Egypt. And so, yeah, they were, I'd have to go back and look at the history more, but
She was also Greek, and there were 7 Cleopatras.
yeah,
Yeah, I always just thought same as you growing up
Just
watching
one.
movies, just one Cleopatra. Yeah, so and they married, and the Ptolemies, that was who she was under, sort of. She married a Ptolemy, her brother, too, if I have that correct. They married, they incestually married.
it sounds familiar. I know
Yeah.
she's the one
Crazy.
that had wasn't she the one that had the brother that's where the Romans came down to protect because the brother was trying to get rid of her? Is that right?
Oh, I don't want to say yes or no, but
I don't want to say
So
anything.
who wants to take on the task of just giving a summary of this part of the line right here? What we just kind of looked at, just to, so that each piece we kind of go back and review. Anybody? Because I was thinking about what Elder Tess said about going back and reviewing these studies, and we need to understand them better and better and better. Do we understand it? So, okay, I'll just put it out there. Somebody want to try to do a little review?
Want to do one?
Okay.
Review.
Is that Phil?
No, that's me.
Sue
Okay,
Ellen.
I can't hear. Maybe it's just me on my end.
Okay, so we're looking at the line on the top. There's the war. Antigonus is the king of the north, and Eumenes is the king of the south. And then they have the Battle of Gabine, I guess. And then during that time, Antigonus manages to get rid of Eumenes by not by just the war, but by taking the Silver Shield's baggage, and then they had a deal: we'll give it back to you if you give us Eumenes. And so then he had left. Then Antigonus just had he essentially took care of Eumenes, even though it wasn't in the battle, but by that trading with the baggage. And then he had his two allies, Python and Seleucus, and he wanted to be master of Asia, I guess. And then he became more and more of a dictator then, and he just wanted to run everything. And and so he even went against, I guess, out of his greed and wanting to be the super dictator, he couldn't even handle having his allies be successful. So he killed Python, or had him killed. And then Seleucus just ran away. And then Seleucus took up with the other allies that he had, I guess, is that correct? With
Lysimachus, Cassander, and Ptolemy.
and yeah, so then Seleucus and those three allies were trying to talk Antigonus into just sharing it and having each of them have be the ruler of different parts of the empire. And he didn't like that at all. He wasn't interested in doing that. So then they started having those wars, and that's, I guess, why they called them the Diadoco Wars. Diadoco, is that right? Diadochi. Yeah, Diadochi Wars. And Diadochi, we found out, means successor. Is that right? Successor?
Yeah, successor wars.
Yeah, so that's what it was all about, to see who would be the successors there. And each of those allies, I guess, had spheres of influence that they brought in to help them, vie against Antigonus, to see how it was going to shape up. So that correlates with the 10 years war of the 10-year Afghanistan war. In 1979, they had the war with, it was like a proxy war with the USA and USSR. And they had allies, and so then in the end, though, like if we fast forward through the wars, in the end, the USSR was defeated, just like Eumenes was defeated. And there were two allies left, allies of the USA, and that was the Mujahideen and the papacy.
Now may that all stick in our heads as we.
You nailed it.
Yes,
Praise
we
the
did.
Lord. You did an excellent job, Sue Ellen. I wish I could have done that good. Thank you.
I was
Well-
trying to remember the part about Babylon, because where was it on the line? This is the same line up here. Where was it on the line where Seleucus fled to Ptolemy and gave up Babylon? Was that in here?
I thought it was when Python was killed, or right about that line, or shortly after that line,
He thought he was coming to.
because he didn't want to get killed.
Oh, okay.
That's what I thought, but
He left Babylon and went to.
But I don't want to make.
yeah. Oh, but it might even be before, or right before Python was killed. Maybe he could see the writing on the wall, so to speak, because if Antigonus wanted to be master of Asia, then did that include
Here it is.
Babylon, and just say, okay, you can have it.
Yeah, here it is. As Antigonus is becoming a dictator, he's visiting these different smaller territories like Pythons, and he's coming as a friend, and then he's just killing them off. And he
Uh-huh.
goes to Babylon. And what do you think Seleucus thinks? Seleucus thinks that he's going to kill him. So Seleucus gets on a horse and flees Babylon. And I think it said he went to Egypt. So he knows that his ally is really there to kill him. So yeah, so it's in this period of time here. You were correct. Thank you, because I was wrong on that one. I was trying to remember. Susan, do you want to read?
Sure. When he attacks the spheres of influence of Ptolemy, this is the area of Kol Syria. Through Kol Syria down through where we would identify Israel, the Gaza Strip, and all that territory. He starts to take it all the way down near to Egypt. We see Egypt, Antigonus has come down and he's attacked the spheres of influence of Ptolemy. Ptolemy didn't have direct control, but he had the recognized authority over these territories. Antigonus, by this stage, is so powerful. He's as powerful as the other three generals combined, so he's no idle threat. He takes all this territory, and then he leaves his son Demetrius to hold it.
So you got Egypt down here, but these are Egypt's spheres of influence. And Antigonus comes down and is conquering, and then he leaves Demetrius here to tend.
He travels back up to start warring against Lysimachus and Cassander. Demetrius is holding his territory, and his generals are telling him, whatever you do, don't fight Ptolemy because you won't win. Demetrius is young. He's never fought a battle without his father. Ptolemy is a seasoned general, trained under Alexander the Great, and they're telling him, you've never fought a battle without your father. There's no way you can fight against Ptolemy and win. So Antigonus has left him to control it, but his generals are telling him wisdom would dictate, don't fight.
So the son wants to fight Ptolemy.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Ptolemy sees the opportunity and he marches out and attacks Demetrius, and they meet at Gaza. Demetrius, against the advice of his generals, fights Ptolemy, and it's known as the Battle of Gaza. At this battle, Ptolemy just annihilates him. He wipes out his forces, and Demetrius flees back up north. Demetrius flees north, and Ptolemy marches up, and he takes all the territory that he lost. He marches up, takes all that territory, all the way up through Kol Syria. Antigonus sees this and rushes to the aid of his son, and he comes back, and they start pushing Ptolemy back down towards Egypt. United again with his father and all the other troops, they succeed in coming down and retaking all of the territory right up onto the borders of Egypt. At the Battle of Gaza, Demetrius is defeated. He's fought against the advice of his generals, and he flees north. His father comes back, and through the history after the Battle of Gaza, up until they make an armistice here, Antigonus comes down and he retakes all the way until the borders of Egypt. So interesting that you see today the Gaza Strip problems, and all the same areas ignited with problems.
It's always Syria. It's
Yeah.
like, it's always over Syria. Yeah, and it was really interesting going through all that history that we did, all the different portions anyways of looking at the Middle East when we did like the House of Saud, when we did the Iranian revolution, the Iran-Iraq war, all those things to just look at what you just start to see it. It's all the same thing over and over again, just different players. He's tempted to take Egypt itself, but there's been something significant happen in this history that we need to store in our brains because it becomes quite relevant. After the Battle of Gaza, which is here, what does that open up the possibility for? Battle of Gaza, you have Ptolemy and Seleucus fighting together. king of the north, king of the south, but you still have Antigonus. You have Ptolemy and Seleucus fighting together. The battle, Ptolemy is fighting with Seleucus as one of his generals. When Ptolemy wins the Battle of Gaza, Seleucus sees an opportunity. Yeah, that's Seleucus sees an opportunity. He takes a small force and he goes back and he retakes Babylon. So this is the rise of Seleucus. He's going to begin to rise there, and we want to mark that he hasn't fully risen right in this history, but he runs back and he takes back Babylon. So at this Battle of Gaza, he doesn't fight Egypt itself, but at this time is when Seleucus goes back to take Babylon back. There's a whole lot more still to come of light to be understood, because if I'm understanding correctly, it looks like what you have is the two king of the north go head to head. Is that what everybody else is understanding? The papacy and the United States?
That's what I thought was going to end up happening.
Because Seleucus is going back to try to take Babylon, and then Antigonus is going to go and try to take back Babylon. So the title for Babylon, right?
The final battle, yeah.
And what's so interesting is, and difficult in sorting all this out in your head, is this is just one line of things, because this, although actually the Mujahideen are in here, so it does build up on Islam, because, and then the Nabateans, because you have all of that going on as well today. So Antigonus gets wind of this, and right when he gets to the borders of Egypt, he hears that Seleucus has retaken Babylon from him, and there's one other threat coming from the east. Because of these two concerns, one being Seleucus and one being the Nabateans, so you've got Seleucus and the Nabateans coming into the picture, the threat of the east, Antigonus decides not to take Egypt from Ptolemy, not to invade. So he only goes to the borders of Egypt, and then he decides to make peace, and it's known as the Peace of the Dynas. So that's the peace here of the Dynas. A peace treaty between Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Antigonus. These two sides make a peace treaty because this war has been going on for a little while, and because their strength is so evenly matched, it's not easily going to be concluded. They're too evenly matched. The Nabateans are a threat from the east, and they're known to be the direct descendants of Ishmael. So when we talk about Ishmael, who does that lead us to the study of? Takes us to Islam. So you have the children of the east, the descendants of Ishmael or Islam, as a threat at this point in time together with Seleucus, and that prevents Antigonus from taking all of Egypt. He's only going to the borders. He goes to this peace of the Dynas with the three, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander, but he does not go into a peace treaty with Seleucus because he wants Babylon back. So the peace of the Dynas doesn't include Seleucus. So he intentionally doesn't go and make that peace treaty with Seleucus, and he marches up to Babylon and he fights what is known as the Babylonian War. So that would be this period here. The Babylonian War was a conflict fought between 311 to 309 BC between the Diadochi, Antigonus, the one-eyed, and Seleucus, ending in a victory for the latter. The conflict ended any possibility of restoration of the empire of Alexander the Great. So Seleucus wins the Babylonian War then, right? Any restoration, a result confirmed in the Battle of Ipsus. It also marked the infancy of the Seleucid Empire by giving Seleucus control over the eastern satrapies of Alexander's former empire.
I was still thinking about the Nabateans. Wasn't the first mention of them in Job?
Job, yeah, I think so, Job.
Which is a type of us too, going through what all Job goes through. all the
Does it say Nabateans?
disasters.
I'm trying to remember. Does it say Nabateans or children of the East, and it traces back to Nabateans?
Well, I just saw you use the word here. So in Job, I believe it uses that word Nabatean. I think that's the first mention.
Yeah, it would be, I think it's in like the first or so chapter. I was trying to remember if it was actually Nabatean or if it was East.
The Nabateans come in and I forget what they do, but they destroy, I think, the house with the kids, or I don't know. I have to go back and look.
Weren't they
But-
called something else? Does somebody remember?
Gee,
Nabateans. I'm going to try to spell it. I'm trying to look it up. Because I keep thinking they're called something different. But but when you go look it up, that
you
it
might
is.
be right. That's why I'm checking and running it by you. That's how I remember from a long time ago.
Is it in the first chapter? Do you remember?
I've got to type in the word.
I tried Nabatean and I'm not getting it. The Sabaeans, I think is what it is.
Oh, you're right. The
Yeah.
Sabaeans.
I had a different word twisted in my head, and that one just finally popped into me. Yeah, the Sabaeans, verse 13,
Thank you for
verse 15.
clearing that up.
And the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them away.
Yes, so the Nabateans, how do we trace those to Ishmael?
I think you can do some internet searching and find that. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. And I think that's what the Sabaeans was the Nabateans, I think. If anybody remembers that.
Oh, they're one and the same?
That's what I think I remember, but if anybody remembers it differently,
Okay.
I guess we could probably look in see, I'm going to see what eSword says real quick. And it was verse 15. That took you to the word Sheba 7. The oath. So yeah, I don't completely remember. So maybe somebody else remembers.
Sabaeans, Job 1:15,
Yeah.
but I don't know about the Nabateans. Anyway, I don't want to slow down the progress of your study.
We're not going to finish this tonight anyway. Because this one's like 88 pages. There's no way we're going to make it. Okay, so the Nabateans, this is Wikipedia. The Nabateans also, well, it's spelled two different ways, were an ancient Arab people who inhabited northern Arabia and the southern Levant. Their settlements, most prominently the assumed capital city of Rakhmu, gave the name Nabatean to the Arabian borderland that stretched from the Euphrates to the Red Sea. Nabateans.
I was doing a search too.
I just stuck it in the chat.
The Judean dynasty. I was looking to try and see where they pin it in the Bible itself.
So this war, they were talking about the Babylonian War. This is a war just between Antigonus and Seleucus. By the end of this war, Seleucus has won. And even though he's had Babylon after the Battle of Gaza, he lost it again in the history of the Babylonian War and retook it and lost it and retook it and lost it. He finally retakes it here. He had Babylon before the Battle of Gabin, but he was a nobody, a two-bit general. It's at this point where he firmly takes Babylon from Antigonus that we mark the beginning of the Seleucid dynasty. And from here, he travels east, and he just starts to rise more and more as a superpower. He travels to the east and finally comes back to end the Fourth Diadochian War at the Battle of Ipsus. But this is the history of the rising of Seleucus, who's established in that history. So this concludes the third Diadochian War. Probably a nice place to stop and if we do this, because I think we're close to time. This concludes the third Diadochi War. As we said before, we have the third Diadochi War and the fourth Diadochi War. They are one war, and in between them, the peace of the dynasty, the peace treaty. In between them, this Babylonian War and the rising of Seleucus. So we've explained the fourth Diadochi War, the ultimate demise of Antigonus, which leaves us with our four famous generals. It finally occurs in the history of the fourth Diadochi War. We could probably go for a few more minutes if you guys want, but we might have to, I don't know how anybody feels about it, because I know I'm not going to, we're kind of having to switch up for Sabbath unless anybody else has anything that they're ready with. We might just continue reviewing this. It's always good to review. I don't know how everybody feels about it. I mean, I'm sure we all do, but we might want to review in our own time instead of on studies. But I know I'm not quite ready with a couple of the notes that I've been preparing. So do you want to go for another 5 or 10 minutes? Or
Whatever you decide, Sister Elaine.
I just thinking, huh?
I think it's okay with Sue Ellen.
Yep.
What, keep going or pause?
Yeah.
Keep going?
Keep.
Okay, keep going for a few more minutes. So the third Diadochi War lines up with the history of World War I. And we know that these two combined also come into our own history to explain it, to open it up. We'll move from the third Diadochi War into the history of World War I now. We'll give a little bit of background. The beginning of World War I is a complicated and difficult history. It's not an easy one to pin down the exact cause. There's multiple causes that led to the First World War. But I think everyone acknowledges that the ultimate cause factor was this tension between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. That was, in fact, where the war began. So there's been this long conflict that's existed between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. And there was particularly one event that led to this war, and it's known as the Bosnian Crisis of 1908, where the situation between Austria-Hungary and Serbia escalated to a situation quite irreparable. So we went through the third Diadochi War here, and now we're going to look at the World War I. Does somebody want to read? Or I can keep reading if you want.
Oh, I'll read.
Okay.
You want me to read?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we're going to step back and just give a picture of what's happening in this history. You have Germany in the west and Russia in the east. Who is Germany? The king of the north. And who is Russia? The king of the south. We want to make the point that when it comes to this history of World War I, Germany and Austria-Hungary only worked together. They made every step in unison, so we want to combine Austria-Hungary with Germany as king of the north. Another reason for it being its symbology, it is the two-horned power, and we know that it's the two-horned power in this history. So just an interesting detail that having
That on me. There, it's a two-horn power. You can we just get that part.
Okay.
I don't know what the typo is there.
Okay, it's the rise of the United States symbolized by Germany, but you also see the destruction of Austria-Hungary, and what do we know is destroyed within this reform line? The United States as a two-horned power. So it's actually giving us more information about the fall of the United States as a lamb-like beast. Okay, so I think what that was saying was that that's a two-horned power as king of the north, just like the United States is a two-horned power, right? And
Yeah.
and we're the king of the north. But now we know in newer, more recent presentations that we're going to continue to act like a lamb and profess to be a lamb, but we're going to speak as a dragon.
Right. Be a lamb. Maintain being a lamb.
Yeah.
Pretending, and then speak like a dragon. Instead of leaving one behind and being the next, they run simultaneous.
Yeah.
If that's the way to word that.
That was really interesting how Tess explained that, that the horns weren't really broken as we had been taught, but we needed to learn that so that we could understand that history through there. It's very interesting. So it remains a lamb-like beast with the two horns, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
what's amazing is how we're tested every step of the way to, like, I don't remember, it was a recent one, which recent presentation she went through. I think it was the divine, can't remember what it was called, the divine of the movement, the putting together the movement. I can't remember the name of it, the title of it, but how, we learn things in simple form. We learn things in simple form. And so when you start to move along the line and you come to a place where you need more detail, you're always challenged with something that you had wrong, or a challenge to is it wrong? What was wrong? Are we saying somebody was wrong? But God designed it that way that we would learn, what we needed at the time and what we could handle at the time and lead us on step by step. But when you learn those things, like with the two-horn power, you have to all of a sudden be able to adjust to see it from the micro, is that the right word? From the micro scale of looking at it.
Yeah, it's also cool because you have to remain flexible.
Exactly.
And that's part of what we have to remain. And there's so much about the way he's teaching us. Plus, your brain doesn't get fixed. It makes I'm not a scientist or anything, but you know how the dendrites have to like fire, so you have a synapse in your brain to keep your brain functioning so it doesn't atrophy. And so it's just, all of it is to help condition us, our minds, everything. It's just amazing.
Oh, did any of you watch the new thing that Parminder did on the about the methodology?
Yes.
Oh, that was really good.
That was really good.
I think he mentioned in that just like Paul and the other writers in the New Testament and Ellen White, they are writing for their time, but they are also writing in such a way as it's applying to us too, and so that's why it's important for us to read it according to, how we're learning how to read better so that we can see the application that's for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating how he explained the principle or the application. Was the prophet writing it as a principle and then you have to read it different? Or was the prophet taking the principle and applying it?
Yeah.
There's so much to it, huh?
Yeah.
It absolutely makes sense that you're looking at the history of the 144,000, the end of all time. Could a prophet of the past and the works of the prophet of the past be used to bring the 144,000 to the place where they need to be and who they need to become? And it just totally makes sense that God would give us a prophet for that time.
Did you ever in your wildest dreams, though, believe you would be one of those that was going to be working for God and see these details like this in this fashion, the way things are playing out? Never in my wildest. I thought we were at the time of the end and all that kind of stuff, but never did I ever dream we would see these things fulfilling like this in front of our eyes.
I'm in awe at the things that we've been blessed to learn. It's really sad to see so much of Adventism reject the view to they have, because we were brought on step by step, and Adventism was given the opportunity. Any one of them could have had the opportunity to come step by step, but because they resisted or rejected, from various places along from the start, or what have you, it leaves them actually blind to even be able to see all this. And it's such a sad thing, it's such a sad thing. I'm in the book of Jeremiah, and just gone through the first few chapters, and it's all about they're coming to the Sunday law, and in that preparation of going back to the church. And it's fascinating to read through Jeremiah with all the light that we've had now, and to see the warnings that are given, to watch the progression, and to see the where they're headed and what's causing them to be. And I found a passage, I think I actually read it on one of the studies, or talked about it, but trying to think of, I think it was chapter 5. I know I shared it with a few people, but it mentions it's God talking and saying, basically saying, well, what are you doing going to Egypt? What are you doing going to Assyria? And so there's two streams that are being shown, that they're either going to Egypt or they're going to Assyria. And you've got these two streams that they're going to, and God's telling them you got it all wrong. So anyways, that was like a really brief, poor paraphrase, but it's just, we see everything that we've been understanding in these verses so much more clearly. And I kind of took it as a left and a right example of what we're witnessing in the United States now. You've got the Egypt maybe would represent the globalism, and Assyria would represent maybe the conservative side, and you've got the left and the right, and neither left nor right are right. They're both incorrect.
15 minutes ago, or half an hour, I don't know.
So, well, anyways, we'll stop here. We're on page 36. And then we'll go ahead and if you guys don't mind, anybody that's here on Sabbath, we'll be doing our usual, because Parminder is doing, we heard Elder Parminder is doing a camp meeting, and it's like, hey, we are going to be able to listen if we want. I know somebody calculated the time. I think it was Susan that shared it. I think it was the Flukas family that calculated it out. But that I think on Sabbath, maybe Susan remembers, wasn't it like 6 in the morning? Or 5 in the morning?
No, Fridays begins at 5 in the morning, but Sabbath was like 2 a.m. or something like that.
That's not going to happen for me. Not at 2 a.m. I'd never make it.
Yeah. There's
so-
one question answer toward the end, but I can't remember the time. Maybe the Flukas family can remember. Have to look at the chart, but there might be one we could participate in, but it would be the question answer after we've
Yeah, I
missed
think that's
all
what
the build up.
I think that's what it was. But it would be like when we're getting ready in the morning. It was before our time we even started, if I remember right. It might not be, but I think it was, but I'll go back and refer it. So we'll just do our normal Sabbath, and so our worship hour will continue this. And if you guys want to do like you have been, the interaction, both and all participating, that's great. And I'm sorry for the typos again. but and I think Hungary is that, is it Hungary like that? Or did I spell that right? I have it in all of them like that. So
I think so. I'm not sure.
okay. So I wrote it down. We're on page 36, and we might ask somebody, we might do, I think it's so cute when she does a spot quiz, because here in the US, in my anyways, where my schooling, it was always a pop quiz. So when she says spot quiz, I always think that's cute. But we might, try to do a review for what we went through tonight on Sabbath. So keep that in mind, anybody that wants to to be thinking on that might be able to summarize what we already went through, and then we'll pick up here on Sabbath again too then. But thank you all for participating. And it'll probably help us all to better learn it. And so we didn't even get to this part, though we just kind of talked about it, but we'll get there. So, but I think that's it. And then we'll just close for prayer. And nobody had any problem with the passcode?
No?
Okay, good. Pretty easy. And I don't intend to change it unless for whatever the reason I have to, but it automatically generates it, and it'll just always be that way unless I go in and change some settings. So, so it should stay the same all the time. And I know what I did with you guys when IPR had a passcode on their thing. I stuck it on a little sticky note and put it inside my phone. So, so I always had it just in case I forget. So let's go ahead. Sister Susan, would you like to close in prayer?
Sure, I will. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much, Lord. We come before you and we're in awe at the way that you're instructing us, at the patience with which you've led each one of us, Lord, the mercy that you show us, the grace. Lord, thank you for thy Holy Spirit, for our teachers, for all of our teachers, our two leaders, specifically Elder Parmenter and Elder Tess, Lord, all our leaders, but particularly, Lord, continue to protect them and bless them as they work so diligently to teach all of us. Lord, many of our members are going through some really difficult times. The fires are out of control, Lord, as you know, but we thank you that not one person has been lost, that all are safe. Yes, it's uncomfortable and it's hard to evacuate. And Lord, we pray for the comfort of those like Brother Francisco and Sister Christine, who slept in their car at a church parking lot, Lord, last night. And they left our meeting early. I didn't get to ask what their circumstances are at the moment, but Lord, bless them and keep them safe and guide them to a warm place to lay their head tonight, Lord. And Sister Jackie up in Oregon and her family members, very concerned, Lord, about her family members, Lord. And we just ask you, Lord, that you keep a hedge of protection around them and that you help us keep our heads on straight, Lord. Every day has been so eventful, Lord. Today was a whirlwind for me, and I feel like my mind sometimes is put through a washing machine tumbler, like I can't think and concentrate, Lord. And I'm sure others are not having exactly a perfectly peaceful existence, Lord, because our lives just aren't set that way. But continue to help us, Lord, because we truly want to be the 144,000, Lord. We're all hanging in diligently trying to learn these truths, and we're doing the best that we can, Lord, in our spheres to learn these truths, Lord. And we ask that you continue to open our minds and fill us with the Holy Spirit and help us, Lord, remember these details so that we can be prepared to share them with those you bring to us, Lord. And thank you for Sister Elaine, that she's held this ministry and position so faithfully, Lord. You put her in there a long time ago. And thank you for the Zoom classes you set up a long time ago that we can all gather together like this. I'm sure some of the people in prayer right now, Lord, have requests that I'm not aware of, but you are, Lord. I ask that you acknowledge those requests, Lord, and thank you for your precious promises that you give us, Lord, that we can claim, that you'll never leave us or forsake us, and that we can go through this storm with the perfect peace, just as you did, Lord. Calm, perfect peace, because you have this. You're in control, and you brought us each to right where we are right now. And Lord, thank you. I found out my only daughter is having twins today. And I was sad and happy when she told me, because it's an awful time to bring a child into the world, let alone two. And Mama in the hospital and all, and my sister in a mental hospital. Lord, it's a lot going on just in my own personal family. But in all this, you're showing us how you're bringing us together. And I just want to praise you for all that you're doing. And I'm sure my brothers and sisters have stories they want to tell and share and praise your name and glorify thee also. So give us a good night's rest tonight, and protect each one, Lord, with heavenly angels encampeth around them. And just thank you, Lord. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts that you've thought to choose each one of us. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.